We have salesperson, monthly sales average, and reference number. And what we want to do here is we want to be able to write in the salesperson's name and have it return to us what their monthly sales average is. So if this was 5,000 rows long or however, we could just simply type in the name William Mitchell. We'll see that we get 1884, and we'll see that we get the 1884. So we do that using the VLOOKUP function. Okay, so there are two things we want to talk about. One is the VLOOKUP value, which is the name that we want to be able to search for. So if we wanted to know Michael Kim's sales number, or whether we wanted to know his reference number, or if we had 10 other columns here, we'd want to be able to use Michael Kim as sort of the key to be able to look up. The second thing is this table array, and that is the entire table of data that you want to be able to reference. And whatever that table is, the far left column has to contain the value that you're looking up. So for us, if we're looking up Michael Kim, we couldn't start by selecting right here. We would have to start so that whatever we're looking up here has to be in this leftmost column. Okay, so in our case, we're looking up G2, which is Michael Kim, and our table reference is B3, so it starts B3, and it goes all the way down to D65. So it's these three columns. Now the next thing is that this here is the column you want to return. So if it finds Michael Kim, okay, in this table, which column 1, column 2, column 3, do you want it to return a value? And for us, this is column 1, and we want it to return column 2, which is the monthly sales average. And the last thing, this range lookup value, and basically if you set it to true, it's going to try to find the closest thing to Michael Kim that it finds. So if there was something else in here that was Michelle Kim and it came first, it's possible that it might show you that instead. By setting it to false, it means that it has to have the exact string Michael Kim as spelled here. So that's the way I want it to be set. So if I hit enter, that's what it's going to return. But if you'll notice here that each of these salesmen has a reference number. So Michael Kim also has this reference number K007. So if I had changed that to column number 3, then instead of giving me his sales, it should give me K007, which is his reference number. And sure enough, it does. And we could duplicate this formula, and we could come back over here and change that one back to 2. So now it's giving us both of these values. If we change this to Emily Lee, we now get K002, and we now get her monthly sales average of 2023. So that's the basics of VLOOKUP. There are other options such as XLOOKUP or using a combination of the functions index and match, but I'll save that for a different video. Let's look at another example. In this particular case here, I've got a list of drugs from toxicology data. So let's say that I have a list of what's called therapeutic data, and this information has been pulled from some other source. And what I want in this case is I'm going to use this as my table of information. Okay, so let's start from scratch. We'll say equal to VLOOKUP. This is what I want to look up, and the table array is on this other tab. So I'm going to select these two columns, and I'm going to use comma, and it says which column do I want to return, and I want to return column 2. And then I'm going to say false because I want it to give me an exact match to the drug that I'm looking up. Okay, so for 6-monoacetylmorphine, we see that there is no therapeutic data. So I can copy this down. Let's spot check one. Our appraisal M is 5 to 100, and we see our appraisal M is indeed 5 to 100. Okay, and so I've just duplicated kind of what we had done before, but in this case I have this internal standard, and I wanted to be able to return what was the range and what was the internal standard. So here's another example. So let's say that we've got one that's a little more complicated. Okay, so let's do one more thing. Let's talk about a named range. What I want to do is I want to come back over here. I'm going to jump to the bottom here. And while I've got all of this selected, I'm going to come up here to this area here, and I'm going to type in TIAFT underscore LIST. And this all has to be one word, or at least there can't be any spaces. So I've got an underscore separated. And now I'm going to hit enter. And what I've done, if I hit Control F3, is I've created this thing that says TF list. And this is a named range. You can see I've got a lot of other ones in here. What that means is now that rather than having to type in what we have here, TF list, exclamation point AB, I can change this. I can just reference the named range TF list. And it might look kind of the same. You're like, why would you do that? What was the point? Well, if the name of your tab is something really long, then it gets to be a big long piece of text. And if you're sometimes it's just convenient to be able to reference a named range. So now if I click on TF list, it automatically jumps here. So if I type in, if I drug list, this is a named range that I have here. So that's another way you can simply use named ranges to help make this a little easier. Let's look at one a little more complicated. So here I have an analytical test where I've tested all of these. This selection here represents different samples that were tested. Each sample is testing for about 60 drugs or more in each one, right? And all of the data that you see in white, this is about 5,000 rows deep, represents all of that information that came out of the instrument. And what I'm interested in is I want to be able to select and parse out just pieces of it that are convenient to the way I'm analyzing my data. So what I've done here on this left side is I just inserted these three columns. I'm calling this Vlookup ID, and all I'm doing is, if you can see here, I'm just adding together this component name and I'm adding it with this sample name. So it's just combining those two together. And what that's doing is it's giving me a unique name. So this right here does not exist in anywhere else in these 5,000 rows. Unfortunately, you can see that this appears in every single row. So if I tried to do VLOOKUP and I was just looking for this component name, it would always just return the first row. So I needed a way to be able to make it specific. And I couldn't just search by standard 1, because once it goes to the next drug, you can see here it repeats and starts over. So if I were just searching by the component name, if I were just searching by the sample name, I'd never be able to get all of the information. By combining them together, I get a unique identifier. And so now we have a unique identifier for all 5,000. So what I did here, these are two pieces of information that I'm interested in returning. So the calculated concentration is already here. So I just said this one is just going to be equal to that. And the accuracy is already here. So I just said it's going to be equal to right here. So you can see that. So that way I can just simply have these three together. And then what I can do, so then I've got a reference list. So what I could do is I could just select these three things, and I could just call this my reference list if I wanted to name this range. So you can see here what I've done is I now created this lookup ID. So all of these drugs that were in this list, I basically turned that into a drop-down box. And you can do that by going to Data, Data Validation, right? And then I'm just going to hit equal, and I'm going to give it the named range for what I used. So for me, drug list, if I type in drug list, it's just referencing this range right here, all of that. So everything in there is now going to appear in this drop-down box, okay? And what I'm basically then going to do is I'm going to create this right here. This is going to be my lookup ID. So just like I did here, where I combined the component name and the sample name, I'm going to do the same thing here so that I have a unique identifier. That means when I'm doing VLOOKUP, this will be unique, and it will be able to match this over here. Okay, so the way I do that is I'm just going to concatenate D3, which is always whatever's in this box and always whatever's in this right here. So if I were to change this to a different one, let's say trazodone, you'll see these numbers change. But this changed and it updated, so it's always this and this. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is, I know that these are the values that they're supposed to be. That's the way this particular test was. I have an expected concentration, and this is my measured concentration. And we're pulling this from VLOOKUP. So we're saying VLOOKUP, what are we going to look up? A7, right here. And I'm going to pull it from multi-quant results A through C, which was A through C. Now, if you remember, we just now changed that to reference list. So I'll show you. I'm just going to change this to select all of that. I'm going to say F reference list, and it should return the second column. It gives me the same number. So I just did that just so that I could show you rather than having that long string, because I named it, reference list. It was just easy to refer to that and always know what I'm talking about. And so now, because I've done that, I've got the same thing with recovery. And so basically I can do the same thing here. You'll notice this one is 93.9, so I'm going to change that to reference list also. It's returning 3. So now I just changed those to say reference list. So now anytime I change this drug to something different, oxycodone, it's going to pull the oxycodone results for these. And then if I go to zolpidem, you get the understanding. So that way I can quickly parse through all 5,000 rows to just turn what I need. Now, if you look here, this says A1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are all supposed to be the same concentration. And it's one level, and these are different. So 10, and then 100, and then 250, and 1,000. So these are just replicates of different concentration levels. And what this is doing here is it's going to actually give me the average of what those measured. And B is going to be the average of what those measured, etc. And so as I'm changing this for each drug, these numbers are automatically updating, right? And so then what I can do is if I wanted to write some code to loop through all of these, I could get me a nice little table of all of that. And so I guess that's what I'm going to do now. So let's just go to, we'll just say drug, let's say Control-C, Control-Alt-V, we'll just transpose that. And we'll just fast format that to be the same, right? And so then we'll go to developer, go to Visual Basic, go to insert module. I'm going to jump through this quick. I'm going to make a new subroutine, and we're going to call it get accuracy, right? Because that's kind of what we're looking for. Once I get, in our case, we're just going to get millions, right? Yeah, we'll just get the average. So we won't worry about measuring the accuracy just yet. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let me think here. I'm going to just create a variable. CT is my abbreviation for count. DMCT is integer. Okay. So I'm going to say sheets, drop down lists, dot select, and what that'll do is that'll go to this sheet here. As soon as I click that, and then what I want to do is I want to say CT is equal to worksheet function dot count A range A. And what this is doing is it's going to count A as a function that just says count all of everything in column A that's not blank, and that's going to be how many drugs we have, how many different times we need to create a loop. And so that's just going to count how many non-blank values we have in this, and that's what we want to know. So in this case, there should be 30. So CT is going to come back and it's going to tell us 30. But what I'm going to do then is I'm going to create a short array, and it's just going to contain these values. and I'm going to say regen ARR to CT. So however many drugs there are in this, if I added more to it, it's just going to make that array however long this is. So that's going to come back 30. It's going to make the array 30 long. I'm going to run a quick loop for K is equal to 1 to CT. Next K, and this is just going to create, so the first time it erase loop, K is going to be 1, the second time K is going to be 2, all the way up until it gets to, which is going to be 30. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ARRK, which is the first element in this array that we made, is going to be equal to cells K, which is the row, and then 1, which is the column. And so it's going to put each one of these values into an array. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sheets, you see results dot select, and then I'm going to say, so that's D3 is where that is. So I'm going to say for K is equal to 1 to CT. Next K. So we're going to do, so we've got all those in the array now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take cells, which is row 3, and A, B, C, D, which is column 4. So that's right here where this list is equal to array K. So the first element in this right here, which is 7-aminoclonazepam, the first time it runs through that loop, it's gonna put 7-aminoclonazepam right there, and it's gonna change all these values to the 7-aminoclonazepam, right? You know what I think is easier? Let's go back up here to this array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's make that about 6, maybe 7 dimensions long. So before our array just held 1 dimension, which is just a drug name. And now we're basically adding 6 or 7, we're actually adding 7 more columns to it. So I'm going to change this here to say array K1. So let me change that, see if I can break this down. The first time it comes over here, there are actually 6 other columns in the array that we're making, but it's not going to fill anything in them. It's going to leave them blank. It's just going to say the first one, which is K1 or K2. It's just going to take the first element, which is K1, and it's going to write in that name. And so everything else in those columns is just going to forget about, okay? Because we're going to come in and fill those in later. So then when it comes back to QC results, it's going to enter in the drug right here. The first time it does that, it's going to put the drug in there, and then it's automatically going to give us numbers. So what we can say then is array K2 is going to be equal to this value right here, which is our QCA, which is row 7, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Column H is 8. So cells 7, 8. Q is equal to cells 8, 8. So that's 7, 8, 9. Need to get 10 and 11. So once we enter the drug, 7-aminoclonazepam will go in there first, and then all this is going to tally. And now what we're going to do is those other columns that we didn't use up here in this array, we're now going to fill them. So this will be 2, this will be 3, this will be 4, this will be 5, this will be 6 in that array, and we'll have one more, which is array 0, and we'll leave that alone. Okay, good. I think that'll work. So then what I'm going to do, once that's done, I'm going to say K is equal to 1 to CT. I'm going to go ahead and say next K. Cells. So we want to start on K5, so we'll go back and change that to 4. So the first time it writes any information down, it should start on row 5. Cells K is going to be, so it's K4, K plus 4, 11. K is 11. Yeah, it's column 11. Actually, there's an easier way to do this. N is equal to 1 to 6 mixed in. So we're going to loop down the columns and across the rows. Cells K plus 4, which would be starting on row 5. And then column K is 11, so that would be 10 plus N, because N is going to start with 1. So that would start us on 5 and 11. Yes, it's going to be equal to ARRKN. Okay, so what that's going to do is once we fill this array, it's going to then come over and it's going to start filling out all of that data here. And I'm going to save this real quick. Oh, okay, it doesn't like it. It's not a problem. So we'll go to File, Save As, Options, and rather than XLSX, we got to change it to a macro-enabled workbook. Yep. And then we're going to hit play and see what happens. We got an error. Function not defined. Let's try that again. Sub or function not defined. Oh, I spelled it wrong. There's supposed to be a K there. There we go. I can't spell. Next. In. Debug cells 3, 4. Oh, there we go. K1. Oh, we got it. Very cool. That was actually really awesome. I did not think that would work as easy as it did. Yeah, so look at that. Let's look at that again. So yeah, so what that did, if we go up here and we look at 7-aminoclonazepam, we get 836-1095. So you can see here, we'll just, so you get 836-1095, 2751, and then 906. So yeah, we got it. And then let's check the last one, which was zolpidem. So we get 1022, 9637, 275, 109. And so the benefit of being able to use the VLOOKUP and to build your lookup tables is you can be able to work out your own math. And sometimes the analysis software that you're using may be fantastic to do a lot of things, but it may not give you the freedom to do some of the calculations you need to in Excel. So being able to build something like this also has benefit that if you're ever audited and you have to prove where you got these values from, not only do you have the raw data, but you've got proof of your calculations. And if anybody ever wanted to just check you, all they basically have to do is just go in and relook at this information. And so here's the last piece I want to say about why this is beneficial. If something in your data changed, so right now, the data that we're looking at, we're not changing any of this data. However it was analyzed, this is what we got. But if something in that process was changed or found to be incorrect and it had to be changed and all of these numbers shifted, well, then you don't have to redo all this work. All you have to do is just copy in the new table, paste it back over top of this, and then rerun the code and it's all right here, right? You don't have to redo anything. So that's the other benefit. If you can build something out correctly the first time, then once your data comes out of, wherever the source is, you can just plug it in. And then it works. And if something in the data has to change, then you just re-import it. And that way you have a tool that's more robust and you can make changes on the fly. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this is somewhat helpful. And good luck building your own pivot tables from scratch.